Hey guys, so I hesitated to make this video a lot because I made one about this topic on my last channel, and because of some people's comments who didn't understand this experience, it upset me a lot and I deleted my channel. But I feel like I've developed more of a thick skin since then, and also I realized that this content needs to get out there because there's people suffering who think that they're alone and who don't realize that there's other people who have experienced what they're experiencing, including myself. There's a lot of people that I've talked to over the years who didn't have the extreme mental symptoms, and so for me personally, I sometimes or often felt really alone in that, and people had convinced me that I was mentally ill, and that was why I reinstated the drug. So I guess before I get into that, I'll get into a little tiny bit of a history. So I went on SSRI antidepressants in April of 2011 for a situational depression when I lost my job. I know now that that was the wrong thing to do, but at the time I just talked to my doctor about how I was feeling, and it wasn't even severe, and we didn't even have a conversation about life and about what was going on and how I could maybe deal with it in other ways. I was just immediately offered an antidepressant, had no idea about the dangers, and so I took it for 7 years, never adjusted the dose, never changed antidepressants, just stayed on that same one. And then I came off in 2018, so 7 years later, did too quick of a taper based on my doctor's instructions, went into a withdrawal state and was in that for about 2.5 years, reinstated because I thought I was mentally ill, got akathisia, was polydrugged, developed tons and tons and tons of symptoms, nothing I ever had prior to starting these drugs, and it's been a very long journey. So when I was younger, like from about age 6 on, I did struggle with anxiety and some OCD intrusive thoughts. I want to preface this by saying that, but they reached a peak when I was 22, so in 2004, but with CBT, self-help, lots of reading, lots of practicing what I was reading and putting into use the tools that I learned, I had eradicated my anxiety and OCD pretty much completely. I was fully functional, went to university, was working jobs, and was fine, living on my own, everything like that. So I had not had an intrusive thought or real, what I would call pathological anxiety, or I don't even like that word, pathological, but interfering anxiety for about 4 years prior to the drugs. Like I said, I went on them when I lost my job and I was depressed, or had a clinical depression according to my doctor. So fast forward to April 2018 when I did my too fast of taper. So I should say before I get into this, trigger warning, this video is going to be very triggering for some people. So if you're easily triggered and you feel like you're not able to handle it, I advise you not to watch this video. I also want to say that what I'm about to describe, yeah, it's very graphic, it's very disturbing, but I feel like it's important for people to know, and also to know that I really don't deal with this anymore, except for when I'm in a wave. And now, I'm going 2 weeks with windows where I feel 90-95% functional, then I'll get a wave from hormones or from too much stress. The symptoms will come back for a couple of days and then they go away again. So I just want to make that very clear. I don't deal with this like I did. Okay, so I'm going to get into it. So what happened to me was I came off the antidepressant too quickly. I was still working and I was at work one day. This was probably 2 weeks after jumping off the SSRI. And I was talking to someone at work and I got a flash in my mind of a violent image. It was related to, I don't know how much I should say on here. I want to get fairly detailed because I want people to understand how much I suffered, and to also realize that if they have these symptoms, they're not alone. So I had a flash of, it was actually a self-harm image, and it wasn't just like a picture image, it was a video, like a video image. It was a moving image in my head. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? It like stopped me in my tracks. And then I'm trying to focus on what this guy is saying to me, this guy from work, and it happened again, flash, and then again, flash. And then I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And when I had intrusive thoughts prior to starting antidepressants, I mean, I would have them, one would pop into my head, I would get panicky and whatever, and all the stuff that comes along with intrusive thoughts. But once I learned CBT, ERP, all that stuff, and how to control the anxiety, and once I understood at a gut level what the thoughts meant or what they didn't mean, I was able to overcome them. And prior to starting the drugs, I had not had an intrusive thought in 4 years. So this was not anything that happened to me had happened to me in a long time. So I didn't have them for 4 years before starting the drugs. I was on the drugs for 7 years, never had intrusive thoughts until I would say maybe year 5. They were kind of starting to creep in again, and I was like, where is this coming from? But I believe at that time that the drugs were losing effectiveness. I don't really think they're effective in the first place, but I feel like I was having breakthrough symptoms, and they were fairly intense, but they wouldn't last long. This was on the drug. So fast forward again to when I'm off the drug, I'm at work, I'm getting these flashes. And I was like, okay, no, I know how to control intrusive thoughts. I haven't had them in like 10 years, you know, where I felt like they were interfering in my life, but I know how to overcome them. So I'm like using my tools, my old coping skills, and they're not working. And I'm like, what is going on? And I'm like, I'm sure once I go to bed and wake up, they'll be gone. Wake up the next morning, flash, 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 like as soon as I wake up. And it's disturbing, like it's really disturbing. And I'm like, I don't really feel, I hadn't started getting full-blown panic attacks from withdrawal yet. My very first symptom was the intrusive thoughts. And so I was like, okay, well, that's really strange that I'm having these repeating thoughts because I didn't physically feel anxious yet. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm like, okay, just let them be there. You know, just learning everything they kind of teach you in therapy and stuff like that. When you have OCD, you know, just let the thoughts be there. They don't mean anything. You know, I'm not a bad person. I wasn't even saying I'm not a bad person. I was just like, I understand what these thoughts are and aren't, and I'm just going to let them be there. And eventually they'll just disappear, because they always had prior to meds. They'd only last, you know, a day or two and they'd be gone. So this is like, then, you know, and then I wake up the next day and they're repeating, and the next day and they're repeating, and the next day and they're repeating. I'm like, maybe I just need some exposure. So I would find like disturbing videos on YouTube. There was actually a Dr. Phil episode about a girl who was cutting and her whole body was covered in scars. And so I would watch that over and over and over. And I'm like, maybe I just need to desensitize myself, because that's part of the ERP. Wasn't working. And so I was starting to, after a couple of months of this repeating, I started getting other symptoms. So I was having, you know, the fatigue mixed with insomnia, panic attacks, depression, rage, irritability. I was, you know, I just felt sick all the time. I just didn't feel like myself. I don't know if I have a video about my antidepressant withdrawal specifically anymore, but like I had probably 30 symptoms and just all kinds of weird, like constant urination, and just like, I just didn't feel like myself. And I would have some like out of body DPDR and just weird stuff. And so, but the worst was this looping. And so this went on for 5 months, but I was still able to work. And it was mostly like I said, I was having these like 30 other symptoms, but the worst was the looping. And it was starting to really get to me. So it was getting to the point where, after about 5 months, I mean, I was, you know, hitting my head with my hand and hitting it against my car window. And I was like, just stop. Like I couldn't make it stop. And it would just repeat and repeat and repeat. And I mean, thousands of times a day, it would just repeat. And so finally I got so depressed from it. I called a mental health crisis line, because at this point I felt like I was in a crisis. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Something is very wrong. And at this point I had no idea about withdrawal. I had never heard of it before. No one alluded me to it. I had not found any forums yet, nothing. And I did mention the anxiety part to my doctor at one point, and he offered to give me benzos. And I was like, no, I'm not taking a benzo. And so I just suffered through it. And then at that 5-month point, I called mental health crisis. Of course, they referred me to a psychiatrist and said it's going to be a 2-month wait. So I'm like, okay. And in that 2 months, suddenly my symptoms just disappeared. But I decided to go to the psychiatrist anyway. And it was weird because I guess I wanted to describe what I had been through for 6 months. And of course I regret that now. But I told her, you know, I had to fill out, because I told her when I got to the appointment, I said, you know, I had all these symptoms for months, but now in the last month, they seem to have disappeared and I feel fine. And she's like, well, base it on when you were feeling poorly. So I did my intake based on that. And of course, I came out with the diagnosis of major depression, anxiety disorder, and bad, like pretty severe OCD. So she says, I want you to go back on your antidepressant. And I took it at full dose because I didn't know, again, about reinstatement, nothing. And she also prescribed me an antipsychotic, which I'm like, I knew like that word alone just scared me. And I'm like, I'm not filling that prescription. So I filled the antidepressant prescription, started taking them again, and had severe reaction, like just bolted out of bed at like 1 in the morning, just like heart just palpitating and pounding out of my chest like I'd never felt. And I had this rushing going through my body, and I was just like sweating through the sheets. And then during the day, I just felt agitated and out of body, like where I would almost like see myself from behind and above, and it was messed up. And I called her and I said, you know, I don't know what's going on, but this is what I'm experiencing. And she said, your dose is just too high, cut it in half. So I did that. Didn't really seem to help. I was just agitated, and I just felt, thinking back, it just makes me so emotional because I was so miserable and so not myself. And my boyfriend at the time was like, stop taking these drugs, they're doing something to you. So I did. And then a month after that, I discovered withdrawal and forums and was reading people's stories and just was shocked by the experiences, because I'm like, this is what's been happening to me for the past 8 months. But again, I'd never really found the mental symptoms. There was a couple people that I had read about who had had the mental extreme, but very, very few. And so I was kind of like, oh, I don't know. So I continued to suffer with this mental looping for another 2 years, or sorry, I said that they went away. So they had went away between month 5 and 6, they just disappeared. And I felt fairly okay for about 5 or 6 months. And then it all came back. I don't know what triggered it. I can't even remember because it was so long ago. Like this was going into early 2019. And I never kept symptom diaries or journals. Maybe I took a drug. I don't remember what happened, like not a psych drug, but maybe I took an antibiotic or something that brought it back. I just can't remember. And it all came back. And then I was looping again and looping and looping and looping. And I looped for 18 more months. And then I was like, I've had it. One day because I was still working at this point. I'm like, I can't take this anymore. There's something wrong. And so I went to my doctor and I said, I want to go back on my antidepressant, because I just was at that point seeing things through rose-colored glasses. And I'm like, I didn't have this when I was on antidepressants. I'm going back on. But I had found out about the forums by this point, had been reading them for a long time. And I'm like, okay, I reinstated once at full dose, didn't work for me. I'm going to start low. So I started low and I was kind of messing around with the doses. I started with 0.5 milligram and my original dose was 20. Then I worked my way up to like 2.5 milligrams, which is 1/8 of my dose, my original dose. And I got akathisia and I felt it in my legs one night and I'm like, oh no. And I knew what it was right away from everything I had read for now. At this point, I had been in this for like 2 years. So, and I noticed too that I was getting other symptoms. Like immediately when I reinstated, my thoughts sped up. So they were bad enough that they were looping, but now they were fast. And then I was also experiencing like other harm thoughts because I'd had the same one looping for so long and now it was morphing into other ones. And so I was like, so I ended up having a reaction again to the low dose. Other than the akathisia, I was like experiencing these like passing out episodes where I would like get really lightheaded and woozy and I would just drop. And my pulse would be sky high and I would go to the hospital ER and they'd be like, you know, your blood pressure is 80/50, but my heart rate would be like high. And so they're like, we don't know what's causing this. And I'm like, could it be from these pills I'm taking? And they're like, well, we don't think so, but we're not going to give any to you in the hospital. So they didn't. And of course they're like, we don't know what's wrong with you. And I had a breakdown and I'm like, I've been experiencing these mental symptoms for so long. I don't know what's wrong with me. And then they referred me to the psychiatrist. And, she's like, oh, well, you're on the wrong pill for OCD thoughts. And so she tried me on a couple different SSRIs. I was getting more and more and more symptoms. The symptoms were just gathering. Every drug I took, I tried at this point, I don't know, 3 or 4 different antidepressants, switched psychiatrists a couple of times. And then the akathisia feelings and the insomnia especially, and the thoughts were getting extreme. So at this point I had to quit working because I'm like, I went 5 nights without sleeping and I'm literally in bed with my mom in the evenings because, and I think I was 38 at this time. And I'm like, I haven't slept in 5 days. I'm pacing around the house. I've got this horrible feeling in my legs. My mind is just going insane. I have absolutely zero control over my mind. And I was so tired. And I had one of the psychiatrists along the way had given me Ativan. So I think I had 10 of them. So I was so desperate for sleep one night, I just took one. and it worked like a charm. And I've mentioned this in other videos, and so I'm like, oh, this is an answer. Like, it slowed my thoughts down. It took away those feelings in my body. It helped me sleep. I was knocked out. But I'm like, I've got to get back on an SSRI because I just don't want to be on benzos long term. I knew about the dangers of them, but I went through those 10 pills quite quickly, and then I was like, I just can function again. And so I was given more benzos and different benzos, and then I was tried on antipsychotics, and that was when I started pacing. So it's like things are getting worse and worse and worse, but I'm still in like a form of denial because I was like, I'm mentally ill. I've got to just find the right drug. I just haven't found the right combination. But at a gut level, I still knew that something else was wrong. I'm like, I think this is the drugs. Like, looking back, it's like, duh. But at the time I was like, no, I've got to keep trying. So then the benzo goes paradoxical after a month, and the involuntary movements start, and the jerking and the burning and the buzzing and the vibrating and the shooting electricity and the, you know, the tingling brain. And I've mentioned my symptoms in other videos. This one is just going to be about the mental. Sorry, this is getting long already. I'm going to get into it. So they ripped me off the benzo cold turkey in the hospital because I end up in the ER. My mom calls 911. My whole body's moving uncontrollably. So at this point, my mental is so extreme. So I get put in the psych ward, and I'm like bawling my eyes out. And I'm like, I have intrusive thought after intrusive thought after intrusive thought. I would have... So they pull me off everything. Well, they pull me off the benzo, and they keep trying to give me like antipsychotics and whatever. They're treating me so much like a psych patient, and I just didn't feel respected at all. And so I'm just like, I'm out of here. I feel like your guys' drugs are poisoning me. I've been in this reinstatement now for 3 months. I've tried all these different drugs. I just keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Now my body's moving uncontrollably. So I left, and the only thing I'm taking is propranolol. So this is February of 2021. So I'm just taking propranolol. I refuse to take any more psych drugs. I'm like, I was never, ever, ever like this prior to taking these drugs. The antidepressant withdrawal was bad enough, but now I've got extreme racing looping thoughts, plus akathisia, plus, like, you know, what I think is probably dystonia. I don't know what it is. You know, my arm's locking into place. It's pulling my neck in. And the thoughts are just extreme. I also tried TMS. So if you're not familiar, transcranial magnetic stimulation. I tried that for 11 days, had a reaction to that, had to stop, all these things. And I just felt completely poisoned. So I come out of the psych ward, and I'm like, I feel like I'm completely bedridden and housebound. I'm just out of my mind. I just could not function. And so I've been in these mental symptoms now so they started when I quit the original antidepressant, then they went away for a while, then they came back in April of 2019. This is now February of 2021. So I'm almost at 2 years back in this constant mental symptoms, but now they're way worse. Now that I've reinstated, now that I've taken benzos, been cold turkeyed off benzos that I've been taking for 3 months. And so now I'm going to get into it. So I would have visions of, it was always sharp weapons. You can imagine what that would be, multiple different types. And I would have visions of them coming through my back, going through my chest, and the thoughts were so aggressive and so violent that I would walk and my whole back would be, it would be like someone was actually coming in behind me and hitting me with something. I would feel it, and it would actually like knock my body forward. Or if it was coming at me from the front, it would push my body back and I would actually fall. And that sounds insane, but it was just torture. And I remember just being like, get away from me, get away from me, get away from me. Because whatever was coming at me, these objects were always coming at me in my mind, and I'd be pushing them away, like physically, and just knocking, like, or they'd be coming through my head, ripping through my spine. And at one point I went to 3 different churches because I'm like, I think I'm possessed. Like, I literally felt like I had my mind and body had been overtaken by some entity. So I'm like, you need to get this demon out of me. And I would just be bawling my eyes out. I wouldn't even know these people. I would just walk into churches and I'm like, I need an exorcism, like something's wrong with me, and just bawling and bawling and bawling. And they would do all these prayers over me and put oil and crosses and whatever, and nothing helped. Like nothing helped. And I was just like, I'm not going to survive this. Like, sorry, I'm getting emotional. And it was just absolutely every second of the day. I would wake up and immediately it was just like something was hitting me in the back or in the chest. And I, you know, when I at one point when I was seeing the multiple different psychiatrists, I did explain this to them. And one psychiatrist diagnosed me with somatic hallucinations because I would tell her what I would be envisioning without, like, not willingly. And I would feel it, like I would have pain and I would feel it just like ripping through my skin and going through my head, and I'd just be ducking. It was just so horrible. I would see faces, I would see cloaked men, I would hear things, talking, not even talking, screaming, gurgling, laughing, and I would feel like there was something like on my shoulder hissing. I could hear hissing. It was so horrible. It's so hard to relive. It went on for so long, and I remember thinking, if this, you know, it's like that whole whatever fires together wires together, and I'm like, if this has been going on for so long, there's no way I'm ever gonna, my brain will ever forget this. I'm just gonna have to figure out a way to live with this. And absolutely nothing distracted me from it. Nothing. The only thing that even mildly distracted me from it was sex, and that was how I got pregnant. My baby saved my life. She really did. I took her swimming this morning, and I'm just like, you saved my life. My pregnancy was horrible. It made my symptoms worse. And then I developed HELLP syndrome and nearly died from that. And postpartum, my symptoms got worse. At 3 months, I was like, I'm never gonna get better. I had my baby in May of 2022. So by August of 2022, I had been in this for 3.5 years, and I'm like, I'm never gonna get better. Why did I have a baby? Like, but it was, I wasn't even supposed to be able to get pregnant. I had a less than 5% chance, and sex was my escape from the hell. And then I get pregnant, and I was going to terminate and was talked out of it. Thank God, because about November of 2022, something just changed. I don't know what it was. I feel like there was this weird, like these weird sensations I was getting in my head. It was like, because the tingling I didn't really have throughout. Well, I did have some of it, but then I was feeling these weird sensations in my head, and I feel like something was like adjusting or what, and then boom, it's like now I spent all morning with my daughter. We were swimming. Then I went and got my glasses fixed, and I don't have intrusive thoughts. I'm just in the moment. Now just talking about this stuff is bringing some stuff up. I'm feeling some like nerve sensations in my face, some burning and like pressure and kind of pain, like squeezing. But it's just like, I think from talking about it, but it was extreme torture for so long. There are people that have reached out to me lately who said that their mental symptoms are pretty extreme. Again, there's only been maybe 10 or 12 people I've talked to that have had the extreme mental like I did, but I'm so much better. Like, I just live my life now. I mean, I still, even now, just talking about it, I think it's bringing up some stress, and I'm feeling some pulsating and some like nerve shocking in my butt and in my legs, just that pulsating, restless electrocution feelings, and some like head and face pain and weird nerve, like it's like spiders on my face. But I didn't have any of that this morning. I'm so much better. I would say I'm at least 80% healed, if not 90. And I just thank God, because I almost didn't survive. I was starting to harm myself because the mental was so severe. You know, like I was ripping my hair out, hitting my head really hard with objects and myself, and I was just like, just make it stop. Just please make it stop. It was so bad. And no coping skills, nothing I had learned from my OCD prior to medications worked. It was literally just a chemical misfiring, and just, it was so long. And I just thank God I didn't give up, because I had my miracle baby and I healed. Sorry. I knew this was to be an emotional video. The mental is so hard. The physical is really bad too, but the mental is just next level. And I just wanted to tell you guys my story, because I came out the other side. I wouldn't say there was anything in particular I did, but I was very careful. I didn't take anything. I wouldn't say I took anything that made it better, but I think it was everything I avoided. So that first time I came off antidepressants, I never had a single window. And I feel like now I'm so much better because I was so much more cautious this time around. And I know the timeline and the recovery is different for everyone. I didn't have any windows for 3 years. Now I get very, very obvious windows and waves, but I get way more windows than waves. I'm starting to go back to work now. I've been on disability for 2 years. I finally found doctors who believed me. I'm going to make a video on how that happened. And I have a great life. I'm going back to work. I'm starting a business. I have my miracle baby. And I wouldn't have been able to experience any of that if I would have given up. And I was so close so many times. I had plans. I just couldn't take it anymore. I just had to share that. I hope it resonates with some of you, and please don't give up. If I can get better, anybody can, you know. Like I said, I avoided a lot of things. You know, I don't drink booze anymore. I did my first withdrawal. I didn't have caffeine, artificial sweeteners. I was out in the sun as much as possible, even though I live in the very cold part of Canada. I was swimming because it helped with the jerking and the movements. Gentle swimming. I avoided like every kind of chemical I could, toxic chemical, I should say. Like I honestly didn't even wash my hair. I was scared of everything. Hair, because I did have a reaction to hair dye, so I became scared of that. And it sounds insane, but it's the truth. Like your nervous system is just so sensitive and so stimulated all the time. You have to be so careful. And I avoided absolutely everything and did everything I knew possible that could make someone healthy. I balanced my blood sugars as much as I could, being a diabetic. I was out in the sun as much as I could. I know some people are sensitive to the sun. I walked and walked and walked and walked and walked. I formed a support group, a video chat support group of other women with severe withdrawals and akathisia. They were my lifeline. I just did everything I could to survive, and I did, and I came out the other side. I'm still sensitive to stress, and I'm still sensitive to hormones, like period hormones. But other than that, I live a normal life. So I'm going to end this now, but I hope it helps someone.